Fred lidera un proceso pionero de participación de comunidades indígenas en proyectos de energía renovable, particularmente eólicos, en el que las comunidades no solo son consultadas, sino que se convierten en socias accionarias con poder de decisión y beneficios tangibles. Su trayectoria es ampliamente reconocida a nivel global como un referente de cómo la transición energética puede convertirse en una oportunidad real de prosperidad compartida para los pueblos indígenas. Fred conversará hoy con Juan Dumas, fundador de Meliquina, socio de este proyecto y experto en coinversión comunitaria en energías renovables en América Latina. Juan conducirá la conversación y nos ayudará a conectar estas lecciones con el contexto colombiano. Para garantizar que esta sesión sea interactiva y accesible para todas las personas participantes, contamos con traducción simultánea español-inglés. Por favor, les invitamos a elegir en el Zoom el canal de idioma de su preferencia. En el globito ponen Interpretation y ahí escojan el idioma para su traducción. Además, a lo largo de esta sesión usaremos una pizarra virtual en la plataforma Mural para recoger sus reflexiones frente a algunas preguntas clave. Esto nos permitirá construir colectivamente insumos muy valiosos para el proyecto. Finalmente, hacia el cierre, podrán compartir preguntas en el chat y les pediremos diligenciar especialmente un breve formulario de asistencia y valoración que será fundamental para fortalecer los siguientes espacios. Este es un espacio diseñado para el aprendizaje mutuo, para la inspiración y para el intercambio. Esperamos que esta primera conversación nos ayude a comprender mejor cómo Colombia puede abrir camino hacia modelos de energía renovable innovadoras, viables, participativos y socialmente sostenibles. Juan, Fred, bienvenidos y desde este momento el micrófono es de ustedes.
Muchas gracias, María Paula. Yo voy a cambiar ahora al inglés para poder continuar la conversación con Fred, así que les pedimos que hagan uso del servicio de traducción. Fred, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We're very, very happy to have you here with us and to be able to learn from you and your experience.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Honored to be able to share the Mi'gmawei's project in regards to renewable energy.
Thanks. So, as 3 Mi'gmawei First Nations came together a while ago in the province of Quebec, they formed the Mi'gmawei Mawiomi Business Corporation. And today you own 50% stakes in 2 large wind projects totaling 222 megawatts. You also hold equity stakes in services companies for the renewable energy and the just industry, and the just energy transition. And you also own a majority stake in a Hilton hotel in Quebec. So that's pretty remarkable. And you've done this in less than 20 years. So over the next hour, what we'd love to do is to learn as much as we can from your journey, both you personally and MMBC's journey. So how it came to be, why, who owns it, what were the key challenges, what are the challenges that you still have, how do you make decisions? And even though there are important differences between Canada and our region, the truth is that there are a lot of similarities as well. And so we hope that what we learned today from you will be applicable to our region here, not only in Colombia, but beyond. So how about we start with you first? And if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal journey, where you were born, where you brought up, what did you study, where did you work, and finally, how did you become CEO of MMBC?
Perfect. I'll give a little background on myself. Like I said, that means good morning in my language. Nindeliwizin Fred Vicaire. My name is Fred Vicaire. I am Mi'gmaw from the community of Listugush. Listugush is situated on the traditional territory of the Gespegawagi. So to give you guys a context, the Mi'gmawei in general is divided in 7 districts. So it spreads all the way from Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, PEI, New Brunswick, and it finishes with us being the last district for Mi'gmawei. Myself, I grew up, born and raised in the community of Listugush, surrounded by my grandparents that live right next door to me. So I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who was a barber and cut hair for a lot of the community members. Learned a lot of Mi'gmaw words that way because it was spoken um, while he cut hair. Um, Growing up, we didn't have a school in the community per se, so I had to step outside the community and go to the regular school system just across in a province of New Brunswick. My father is Mi'gmaw, my mom is Acadian, so I had a mixture of French, English, and Mi'gmaw, so I was surrounded by different cultures in my household. But grew up with friends on the other side that spoke French, and then in the community, most of my friends there spoke English. So I grew up kind of understanding the differences of the surrounding communities. And then I decided to pursue to have my bachelor's in administration at the University of Moncton in New Brunswick. Um, I met my wife at the time, so we've been together for quite a while now. High school sweethearts, so we've been together for 29 years. So it's been a while. She decided to pursue her master's degree at Ottawa U. I decided to follow. I started work with actually a political organization at the time called the Congress of Aboriginal People, which opened my eyes to the dynamics of Indigenous people living outside their communities. This group was representing more of that group. Then worked for AFOA Canada, which at the time stand for the Aboriginal Financial Officers Association of Canada. They basically built capacity in finance, and a lot of the political structures that we see in place now that help fund a lot of these large-scale infrastructure projects were driven by the AFOA and the leadership at the time. I was then recruited to come back in my community of Listigish to work in finance. This was back in 2010. Worked there for about 5 years in a variety of different projects. One, namely, a large-scale land claim that Listigish brought to terms. Then I was also Director General for the community of Giskabigiak for another 5 years, and then decided to take this back role of CEO for the Mi'gmawei Mawiomi Business Corporation. ECDEV has always been a passion of mine. I have 2 kids, like I said, with my wife for 29 years. My kids are twins at heart, and I say that because our biological daughter was born. We were expecting twins. We lost the child during pregnancy of the first term. We adopted my son, who's only 2.5 months different from my daughter. So that's why we call them twin at hearts, because when you see them, they basically act like twins. They fight like brother and sister all the time. And they're really closely connected. For us, it's very important as a household family to kind of expose our family to different cultures. So for the past 3 years now, we've been taking on international students that live with us for a full school year. So we have had someone from Germany, Spain, and this year we have someone from Belgium that's living in our household, which is great for my kids because they already speak English, French, and Mi'gmaw, and now they're learning Spanish and they're learning Dutch at the same time and German. So I love seeing my kids grow and being exposed to all this different culture. Prior to that as well too, we've always been a foster family, so we've always had kids coming inside out of our family, and they all stay in touch as well too. There's actually a foster child that stayed with us all the way to she graduated high school. She's at university now. She graduated university, and she still stays in touch with us. So that's a background of myself, Juan. Very close-knit family, and that's about it from my side.
Thank you, Fred. Thanks for sharing all of that. It looks like a very full and meaningful life, and you've been busy definitely on all fronts. And it makes me want to go and live with your family too.
You got to be a student, Juan, if you want to do that. You can come for a year.
So thanks for that. And before we go into the origins of your company, of MMBC, could you please explain to us or describe what your lands look like? Is this like forest, sea? Is hard winters? What do people make a living of? How are you organized? A little bit of the context so that we can better understand what drove you and your communities to do what you're doing today.
Yep, my pleasure. So Gespegawagi means the last land, and it basically means the last district, right? So we are situated in the province of Quebec, but historically we didn't have provincial borders. So our traditional territory actually spreads into New Brunswick as well too, northern part of New Brunswick. The Gaspésie, so the Gespegawagi, it's kind of a point of Quebec. It's the most eastern point of Quebec, and it's separated by two bays. So the beauty of our territory is that we have two great water sources with large scale winds that get hit on both sides. And the middle part of this is forestry. So the Gaspésie per se is not a large population base compared to cities like Quebec or Montreal. For Listugush, we're close to about 4,000 members that live in the community. Geskebegak's about a little over 1,000, and Gespeg about the same thing. So we're mostly surrounded by forests, mountains, wildlife, and then rivers on both sides and bays. So our main sources of commerce forever has been forestry, hunting, and fisheries.
Great, thank you. And so what drove these three Mi'kmaq communities to come together and form a company to develop your own renewable energy projects? What was the main motivations?
The main motivation was frustration. That was the driving force originally. The three communities were tired of seeing wind development on their traditional territory being developed without any equity participation and minimal compensation for loss of land for those projects. So the driving force was really frustration because the Mi'kmaq have always took a stand politically to say that these are unceded traditional territory, meaning that we have treaties in place which have not been respected by either provincial or federal jurisdiction. Mostly provincial because energy falls into the provincial jurisdiction. So for us, it was very important to take back charge of our traditional territory, of what was going to be developed on our traditional territory. And wind was a sector that they could really connect to, especially when you think of the footprint that it does on your traditional territory. It is a source of energy that yes, there is disturbance during construction, but you can restore the land back after. If you do decide to take down the operation, you can restore back the land to what it was prior to that usage.
Excellent, thank you. And so how did it all start? What was the spark that led to the creation of MMBC?
So I would say Listigish is more of the feisty communities out of the two. There's always differences between communities, and there's different realities and perspectives and objectives. Listigish has always taken a strong political stand, whether it come to salmon fishing, forestry operation. So when wind development was being created on their territory, Listigish actually took initiative back in the early 2000s to start their own team at looking at how they could equity-wise participate in wind projects on their territory. So they've tried to combine with regional municipalities, they tried to combine with wind developers, they tried to push politically, and all of these pushes went unsuccessful until 2009 when the three communities gathered collectively and noticed that if we collectively send the same signal politically to Hydro-Quebec and to the province of Quebec, that they had a better chance at pushing and politically pushing Quebec at signing a PPA with the three Mi'kmaq communities. So the driving force was really that. Initially it was Listigish, But then the two other communities jumped on board because, again, they could buy into this wind development, again, thinking 7 generations down the road, this is a great investment for a nation building experience.
Great. So did you set up MMBC first and then you started working towards that PPA, or was it the other way around?
So originally, the MMBC was not on the table. Really, it was the 3 communities, and they were driven by our sister community, which takes care of more of the governance and political aspects for all 3. So they are called the Mi'gmawei Mawiomi Secretariat. So politically, they pushed that file forward, and they negotiated the PPA. The structure of MMBC came about when they did negotiate the PPA. So we needed a vehicle to park our limited partnership that we created with Interjex at the time. So when they created MMBC, they could have created just for one vehicle, but collectively, all 3 said, this is big what we're doing. And I think this is a vehicle that can really pursue even more than just one wind farm. And we've proven it today. We have a second wind farm in construction, and we've negotiated a large scale structural zone agreement between 2 parties for up to 6,000 megawatts. So initially was for one wind farm, but when they saw the potential, they decided to create this vehicle that could just then create all these different limited partnerships underneath.
Right. So we'll get to the 6,000 megawatts in a minute, but let's start with the first one. And
Yes.
actually, you decided to go quite large for your first project. So 150 megawatt is not no small feat, right? And so let me try the name. So the name of the project is Meskig Ugyusun, which means big wind. Did I get it right?
You got it right. You got it right, Juan.
And so these are 47 turbines
Yes.
in municipality lands that you managed to build in partnership with Interjex, an important company from Quebec, I believe. So tell us a little bit more about who came up with the idea of this project, why 150 megawatts. Give us a little bit of the rationale behind the design of this project.
Yeah, so like I said, initially Listigish had started doing wind data collection already, and that was a specific territory where they had installed wind turbines to collect data at the time. So they already had a vision of exactly where they wanted to situate this project. They had done first analysis, and the project per se is situated between the communities of Listigish and Guescabegia. So they're about a half hour in each direction, and then about 35 kilometers more north of Escuminat. It's a forestry road. The road was already operational because there is already forestry operation being completed there. So the main reason of the 150, because the site per se of what we had identified and did the first consultation with community members, it was originally for a site of 300 megawatts. That was the size of project that we wanted to put in place there. Why the 150? That was a negotiation between Hydro-Quebec and politically of what could be access from our 3 nations, and what on the other side they could say, yes, we agree to a PPA with you guys for a cap limit of that. And just to give you an example, Hydro's really strict on the 150. Yes, we have 47 turbines, and to cap it at 150, there's actually one turbine that's smaller than all the other turbines that are on there, which is like the weirdest, because then there's extra cost just because you ordered a separate turbine that's actually smaller. So we told them we could just like install the same turbine and cap it, but no, they really wanted just one turbine at that capacity. So the concept of the 150, again, when we did consultation with community members, which our MMS or Secretariat kind of took hand, they did it for a full zone of 300 megawatts because they had the intention of, okay, we'll do 150, but we need to do it bigger in case that we do another separate project. Hence the MU2. So for this aspect. Again, with that, we did a lot of consultation with community members in regards to specific areas for hunting, traditional medicine picking, areas that we knew community members utilize for harvesting certain type of wood as well too. So we work with community members to say, okay, here's a turbine, here's the layout of the land. We're thinking of putting a turbine there. And then they would come back and say, no, that doesn't work because we traditionally pick medicine there. But you could put it here, and actually, if you build this access road, it would actually help us to access our territory of where we go actually pick traditional medicine. So there was this hand-in-hand work that was done with the MMS to help us identify specifically of where the turbines would go.
So many challenges, pop up as you speak. So one of them is alignment. The other one is access to capital. The other one is governance. So let's tackle each of these one by one. So about alignment, and let's talk about a little bit more about this consultation process with the community, because what you're showing is that it's not that someone designed the whole thing and then went to the community and said, hey, here's the project. How can we compensate you for this? Rather, this is more like an iterative process in which you designed the whole thing together with the people on the land, saying, hey, do you like this turbine here, or would you like it there? This road, if it comes here, it's probably better for you than if it comes this way. So that's very much early stages of project development, that you're engaging a community or the local population. How many people are we talking about?
So again, for us, it was engaging our community members. So ensuring that we're doing open houses in the community specifically of Listigish, Giskabigyak, and Gespeg, and ensuring that we had a voice from each of those sectors. So from our elders to our adults to our youth as well too. Again, it was very important because we built this project collectively, right? It's like you said, Juan, it's not a developer that came to us and said, here's a project that's already been kind of shaped out and modeled and everything's been set. We really had a vision to create a project, collected data on wind, and picked the site to say, here's a great spot, but let's build it together with our community members. And we want to have that 50-50 equity, not just finance-wise, but governance-wise as well too. So our board is comprised of 3 members of Mi'gmaw and 3 members from Interjex. And that's been the formula that we've applied throughout our projects, is that we not only want to be equity-wise partner, because we just don't want to be silent partners. We actually want to learn and build and grow our capacity for community members, and not just the win, but the whole process of building a project collectively. Because there is a lot of things that people don't realize that go into the business aspect as well. And we want to give our community members that aspect to grow in sectors that they never would have had opportunities to grow in prior to these projects.
Right. So we believe that when we talk about partnerships between companies and indigenous peoples, usually everybody starts thinking about the equity part, but there's another really important bit, which is the being partners in development, which is let's develop this together, and then let's make some decisions together. And so one thing does not replace the other, or they should go hand in hand. Like you do one and then you do the other one. Now, this all sounds great on paper, or at least in concept. But how did you get to own 50% of your first project? Now, let's not talk about both of them. Let's talk about the first one. 150 megawatts. What's the total cost of the project?
So the total cost of the first project was 280 million. And this was we started construction in 2013. So, and was commissioned in December of 2016. So right now the cost has skyrocketed, even especially more during COVID. But the 50-50 was very important for the Mi'gmaws of when we negotiated our PPA, when we then picked our partner to partner really with us. they needed to accept that this was going to be a 50-50 partnership and not a 25, 75 or a 60-40 split. And the main reason was we wanted the Mi'gmaws to still be in charge of our project. We didn't want to be diluted after we brought a PPA, and we wanted to learn on a governance level, what does it take to keep this project going? Because yes, this was our first project and we had to learn a lot in regards to governance, but structuring a project for construction, post-operation, ensuring that we have training in place for our members to hit every employment opportunity that was set out for them during the phase of construction and post-construction as well too in operation. So for us, that 50-50 was a deal breaker. So we met many wind developers at the time, and some didn't have or didn't accept that vision of us being 50-50. Interjex was one that really understood what we were trying to achieve with this 50-50, and it was fruitful for them because putting in that time and accepting that, say, deal breaker line meant that, you know, they could get past that, and then we partnered with them for MU2 as well too, right? So when you build that trust and understand our vision and objectives of what we're trying to achieve for our nations, it goes a long way. And yes, it is time consuming at the beginning, but on the long run, it is so worth it for companies to invest the time at the beginning to build that relationship and that trust from the get-go. And they need to understand what you're trying to achieve. If they don't, that means along the way you will have difficult situations that maybe partners will not, you know, be as successful as what we've achieved with MU1 and MU2. So yeah, I think it's very important for communities to share what they're looking out of this partnership as well too. If it is just a passive investment, then that's fine as well too. But you need to raise those comments early on to your partner.
Excellent. So I'll go back to the 50% in a minute, a follow-up question on that. But I think that what you just said shows that the idea that, yes, working with communities requires an additional upfront investment is true, but then that's compensated with not only a better social performance or performance overall of the project, over the life of the project, but also it gives you the opportunity to go for new projects with that same indigenous group as you're doing in your second project, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let me go back to the 50%, because 50% in a project finance structure is still quite a bit of money, right? And so I'm assuming that your balance sheet was not big enough to access that capital easily. So how did you manage to access the capital that you needed to invest 50% of that project?
Not only that our balance sheet wasn't strong enough, Juan, but there's a lot of barriers for First Nations across the country in regards to the Indian Act that limit your capability of borrowing. At that time, back in 2013, there wasn't many financial options for large-scale infrastructure projects like this. Banks could do it, but at a really, really high rate, and these are long-term projects, right? So banks weren't really interested. There's been a switch now. They're really interested into financing these projects now. But we have other tools in place that could borrow long-term debt at a reasonable rate of return. So if you're getting a 10 or 12% return, you could borrow at 5 or 6 and still make a, you know, 6 to 7% return on your project, which is good. For us at the time, this was one of the concerns that we raised to our partner at the time was we don't have the balance sheet to borrow. We don't have the cash. We don't have the capacities to be able to borrow this. So our partner agreed to fund our portion of equity for this project at different shares. So they get a higher percent share at the get-go, and that balances out in the middle. And at the end of the project, actually, we get more. So there, which is fine for our end because we still wanted to keep that governance structure at 50-50. So financially, we were okay saying, you guys take more upfront at the beginning to pay off your upfront costs for the project. will still sit in governance-wise at 50-50, and we will take the back end part of the agreement in regards to the financing aspect. So that's how we financed our first project. I talked to a lot of First Nations across the country. A lot of their initial projects have been done this way, where their partner upfronted the cash equity-wise for these projects. If not, they wouldn't have been able to do these projects. It's just the reality of First Nations. We, are limited with revenues that come in and that are generated in the communities.
Excellent. So you need not only a partner that is willing to spend more time to work with you, invest more time at the very beginning, but also be willing to make an investment to somehow loan you the money that is necessary for you to be able to be a 50% equity partner. But they are doing this not because not out of their very big hearts, but also because this is good business for them, right? I'm assuming that Energex is thinking this way. So now they know they can partner with you on the next 102 megawatts that you are building today. And I am assuming that your equity position and your economic position in that project is different than in the first one. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct for our second one. Actually, we've built capacity, and I didn't mention, we didn't mention it early on, but we actually own shares in a financial modeling company that does financial modeling for wind projects. We use them as a client for MU2 to help find our equity for this project, for the second wind farm. They were so good that we decided to invest in them because we see a potential and opportunities in the province of Quebec. What we brought to the table first, so our second wind farm is different than our first one. This was a competitive bid through the province of Quebec. So it wasn't a PPA that we negotiated with Hydro. We actually, with our partner, signed an agreement to place a bid to be competitive with other projects. Hence why the 102 specifically, it was what was allowed on the transmission line on our traditional territory. So for this, we took a position to say we don't want our partner to upfront our cash, and we want to limit as much cash as we can on our side to inject as our equity. So this was a huge endeavor for our partner in this, Pla'a. But it became fruitful because not only did we find our equity financing for this project, but we actually brought a better return for our partner in this project. So not only did we help finance our portion, we actually brought a better return to the project for even our partner. So kind of a win-win in the situation of Energex helped us in MU1. We are helping Energex in MU2 to get a better return for them as well too. So kind of a flip side. And I think this was because of what we were able to build capacity-wise internally of what we brought to the table and all these different partnerships that we were able to put in place as well too.
Excellent. Wow, you're giving me a lot to think about, especially when we're looking into projects here in Colombia, but also elsewhere. And yeah, you're giving me new ideas. But anyway, let me continue with our line of thought. And I wanted to ask you on the how you use the dividends, right? Because there's something called the resource curse, which if a community gets flooded with more money that it can actually manage, it can actually hurt the community in the same way that large oil discoveries in very small countries have hurt the governance of those countries. So do you have like a trust fund in place or something in place that manages those resources and allows to make the best use of them for future generations?
Yeah, so you are right, Juan. Sometimes if you do generate too much revenue all at once, it can have a negative impact for communities, because if they're not used to this kind of cash coming in and they don't have the governance structure to manage this cash as well too. It can have a negative effect. We've lived through it in Listigish with the land claim. It was a large scale injection into the community, and I think it could have been better managed, but decisions were made at the time. For us, because we have 3 collective shareholders of MMBC, all the revenues and because we create limited partnerships, it's a reason for us to tax shelter ourselves and our communities. Due to the Indian Act, any revenue that's generated and then sent back to each community is exempt from taxation. So we structure all of our limited partnerships that way. Those funds are funneled back to each community, and then collectively they decide to funnel back to us. And yes, we have our operational budget. We have certain pockets of funds that we allocate. So we have an investment policy internally for us, for the MMBC, where we have a certain cap every year that we can do small scale investment. So these kind of, wind servicing company that we bought 51%, an IT company that we bought at 51%, buying shares through Plan A, buying a hotel in Quebec City amongst different nations as well too. It allows us to have that leeway, and it takes away the political aspects of these business transactions that we're doing, because the speed of business is very fast, makes it difficult for each community to be able to be at that speed. The other large scale portion they have in a trust fund collectively now. They haven't decided exactly how they want to divvy up so far, but collectively they've understand that this is a nation building experience. And with the announcement of the 6,000 megawatts, they're fully aware that this portion of these funds might go for equity participation when it comes to that. But for now, they're conscious that this trust fund is at least building interest for them. They haven't decided how they want to split, but there is a direct impact in community in the sense that there is funds that are transferred annually for language, culture, and education as well too.
Excellent. Thanks. So far, I have had the privilege to ask all the questions to you, but I also would like to invite everybody who is participating in this webinar to join us as well, and put your questions in the chat window so that we can read them to Fred and we can have an open conversation. While you do that, I'll continue to ask a few more questions, Fred, and thanks for enduring this. So one of the key sort of concerns that I have seen from business people about equity partnership has had to do with governance. So many of them have said when we share this model with them, it's like, wait a minute, like who makes the decisions then? Like, does this mean that the community will be making decisions about project operations? Will they be involved in everything? Does that, how does that affect efficient progress of project construction, among other things? And so what was your experience owning 50% equity and having also 50% of decision-making power in this company?
So again, when we say we have 50% on the governance side, we do. But then there is a set aside of rules of where, because we partner with someone that has that expertise, there's certain areas that we delegate that authority to them or set limits on authority. So we will have a, say, operational budget for construction at the get-go. And if nothing is flagged during construction, then the board doesn't need to meet and everything's fine. Then there's certain limits where, okay, construction has increased by 15% for XYZ. The board will meet collectively, both parties, and decide, okay, what's the best course of action, or why are we approving this 15%? So again, we're not into the day-to-day when they're doing the building construction, because they are the expert when it comes to that. But when there is red flags that need to step in, then that's where our governance board steps in and makes decision with their board of governance as well too. So again, if there's a fear that you're going to pick a red door instead of a white door, that's not the case, right? We don't want to get involved into the what are the specifics. We really rely on our partner. That doesn't mean that in future projects we wouldn't do that. We might become to a stage where we're building that capacity where we could offer great expertise in modeling projects, in construction of projects. Like I said, we're not done growing one, and you'll probably see more limited partnerships that are being created in a variety of different sectors, just because we're understanding we want to close this full circle of construction as well too. Not just building projects, but we want to get involved in the construction phase of it as well too, by owning companies that could do specific work during construction and post operation as well too. Getting wind technicians that are servicing our own turbines at the site. So again, for us, it's a holistic approach. It's a whole circle, and how do we close that collectively?
Great, thank you. So we have some questions coming in. Let me go through them very, very quickly. So first one from Daniel Fernandez is on off-takers. So it's important if you can clarify for everybody here who are not familiar with the energy system there. So you negotiated a PPA directly with Hydro-Quebec, but then in the other one, it was the result of a tender. So can you explain what Hydro-Quebec is, how they operate, just briefly, so that everybody can understand why you managed to negotiate a direct PPA first, and then you participated in a bidding process?
So power authorities in Canada in general, they're regulated provincially. So each province has its own power authority. They are a separate entity from the government, but their shareholder is the government per se. So our first PPA, we negotiated with Hydro-Quebec to have our own project. So we negotiated one-on-one with just Hydro-Quebec. The second wind farm is really a competitive bid that Hydro-Quebec made. So they're looking for power and submit a proposal for individuals to put in projects with a certain return. So there's more risk in that process, just because you have to put in a bid with a certain amount that you will sell the electricity at. Whereas the first one, it was a negotiation between parties. So less of a risk, just because you can build that project together, and we put a nice cushion for us to kind of damper that risk. In the second, you need to be very aggressive because you're competing against other projects that are situated across the province of Quebec. So that's the difference between the two, and that's kind of the two separate risks. But one takes longer, right? The PPA that we negotiate with Hydro-Quebec takes a lot more time. There's a lot more issues that are involved in that kind of agreement. The second one is purely commercial.
Great, thank you. So there's a question on the legal structures and the vehicles that you've established for these projects. I don't fully understand how the question has been written, but my interpretation is that they're interested about understanding what were the legal vehicles that you structured, and the policies or the legal documents that you had to structure, and what probably were the differences between those that involve a community and those that you would normally do without a community.
So because we are both a corporation, so Interjex and ourselves, there is limited partnerships that we created. So legal documents that are set aside between the two partners, again, with detail of what is allowed for spending amounts, what authority our governance board has, what do they need to prove, and vice versa on their side as well too. So for us, it was very important to do this. Even if you're a First Nation in Canada, you need to set up a corporation in order to generate revenue that's outside of the community. So everything we create a new limited partnership underneath our vehicle. So we are the general partner that manage all of these limited partnership, and then those funds funnel back to each community. And why we structure it this way, it's no hidden secret. It's for tax purposes in Canada. It's really for them, for the communities to continue that exemption under the Indian Act, that they are not subject to federal taxation or provincial taxation. So that's why we structure it that way. It might be different internationally of how you would structure it, depending on what variables you're looking at.
That seems very smart. So there's a couple of questions that go in the same direction, which is if someone is exploring this kind of project or partnership, let's say, and I mean companies and communities, or who are sort of having the initial conversations, what advice would you give them? What are the things that they need to keep in mind as they are starting an equity, or they're beginning to build an equity partnership?
Well, one, the equity comes with social acceptance, right? That's the key is why communities want to get involved equity wise is because towards their partner, they can then say, well, we'll take care of the social aspect. But if we have equity participation, you can ensure that we'll be able to consult their community members, explain the project, and explain to them what the return is so that they can think again 7 generations to the road. Okay, today is this. In 7 generations, here's the impact of what we can do. Prior to these projects, the issue was we didn't have social acceptance from our community members with all of these projects that were getting built on their territory. Taking charge governance wise and having 50-50 in that partnership allows that voice to be voiced at the governance table, right? We can tell our partner to say, here, we don't accept this because of X, Y, Z from our community members, and we can work around collectively. Whereas back in the day, it was, well, we need, companies need to get around the First Nation basically to get their project. Here's how we get around them. But then it creates a lot more friction and frustration. So I think the number one lesson is if people are ready to have equity participation, then the First Nation needs to be ready to engage their citizens firsthand in order to present these projects so that you can get social acceptance from the get-go.
Great. There's a question from Pedro Mican Garcia who's saying, who mentions that at the beginning you said that 3 Mi'kmaq communities or First Nations would come together to form MMBC or to start the first project. He wants to understand what were the challenges that you faced to reach that initial agreement and how you overcame them. And I'm assuming that if you had a very feisty First Nation and then 2 others that were very different, that was probably not a very easy conversation.
No, it was very easy one, very simple. And no, it took a lot of time to politically convince all 3 communities that collectively they were much stronger together than trying to tackle each of their own projects individually as community members. And I can't take credit for that. That was my predecessor at the time that really took the time and work to meet each of the council, raise their concerns, explain to them the vehicle of what they were trying to create here. And I think at the end, it was really the nation building aspect. Because again, you got to think in 2009, they came up with this, oh yeah, we're going to build this 150 megawatt wind project and we're going to get 50%. Everyone was like, no, this is not going to happen. We don't have the cash. We don't have the capacity. This is not going to work. We've seen it over and over, projects or pipe dreams that haven't come true. Swing back 15 years in the future, and not only did we do it, we're in phase 2, and we just signed a structural agreement for 6,000 megawatts on our traditional territory. So I think now that initial work internally of what we did to convince our political communities to get on board really became fruitful, because we see it now that they truly understand and they see the vision now of this nation building exercise for them.
What a fantastic journey. So Clyde from South Africa is asking, what was your debt equity ratio and what was the debt from was the debt from a single bank or was it syndicated? So I'm assuming in the first project, you didn't have debt from a bank, whereas in the second one you did.
Correct. So first one, and again, we collectively tried to minimize as much financial risk for each community. Hence why the limited partnerships that we create as well too. The communities, and I didn't talk about this, but we have our own board of directors as well too that have a certain level of authority as well too, and it limits that liability to those communities as well too. What we don't want is one of our limited partnerships kind of tanking or going sideways, and then they take a recourse to our shareholders. So we're that buffer zone for them, where we will take that hit or that financial risk for them, and that they're not jeopardizing their own financials on their side. So again, even for our second wind farm, we had opportunities where we could leverage their debt for each of the communities to raise our equity. We put a stop line on that and said, no, we want to do it by ourselves as shareholder with just the funds that we have collectively here. We don't put in jeopardy any of the revenues that are independently generated by each of the communities. So they don't have to kick in any financial incentives for future projects. And I believe our model will continue that way as well too in the future.
Great. So here's a question that I think also allows us to tap into your 6 gigawatt plans for the future. So Byron Wama asks how to deal with communities that do not want to support wind projects, but do have the potential. So as you've mentioned that you've done a huge consultation process within your land, with your people to structure these projects that you have in operation and also in construction. But 6 gigawatts is a different league, right? And so you may find people who do not want to do this, right? How do you intend to go about that?
So again, we're going to apply the same formula as we did as our first wind farm. So the 6,000 megawatt is what is a potential on our traditional territory. Our traditional territory is quite large, and this won't be just one project. We've identified certain areas that have a nice potential of wind development. We will collectively, with our 2 other partners, design these projects and then go consult with their community members. If our community members say no, then we're going to look at other zones for whatever XYZ reason they would give us. Or again, it might be something where we need to hear out what are their concerns, and is there anything we can put in place to limit or eliminate that risk that community members are raising. So again, chances are we will go from the western part of our traditional territory and then move to the eastern part just because of transmission line issues. Because we're fully aware that the 6,000 megawatts, we will need a new transmission line. And even that's a whole process with our community members in regards to consultation as well too. So we're not going to force projects on them. We will collectively build projects with their input from the get-go. So no zones or no specific areas have layouts. All we have now is certain pockets of areas that has a potential to do wind projects. And no wind developer has been identified for any of these projects as well too. This is really a partnership between Hydro-Québec, l'Alliance de l'énergie de l'Est, which represents the municipalities. So kind of the same vehicle that we are, but for municipalities on our territory, and then ourselves, the MMBC.
Okay, great. Thanks, Fred. We're coming to the hour now, and so we need to close. I must apologize to those who asked additional questions that we were not able to cover. So I will hand it over to Maria Paula, not without thanking you again. I have to tell everybody that we met at the 2024 First Nations Major Projects Coalition Conference, and I asked you if at some point we would like to ask you to share your story with us. Would you do it? You said yes immediately. We didn't have to insist. So you've been very generous to us, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you, Fred.
It's really my pleasure, Juan. And like I've said on that day when we met, we really want to share our story because the more Indigenous groups can get involved equity-wise and kind of create the same type of project, I think will help the future and it'll help the development of renewable energy just across the world.
Wonderful. Thank you. María Paula, all yours.
Fred, muchísimas gracias por tu participación. Es una historia realmente muy inspiradora y que motiva, obviamente, a este equipo y a Colombia a seguir trabajando sobre la creación de modelos de innovación social que nos permitan viabilizar todo el potencial energético que tiene Colombia, pero que obviamente ese aprovechamiento logre hacerse también en términos de equidad, de justicia, de participación, de inclusión para todas las comunidades que están en los territorios donde tenemos este enorme potencial energético. Así que muchas gracias. Creo que todos salimos hoy ilusionados en que esto también puede ser posible para nuestro país. Muchísimas gracias a ti, a Juan y a todas las personas que participaron en nuestro webinar. Les recomendamos, por favor, no olvidar diligenciar su asistencia, porque de aquí en adelante lo que se vienen son muchos otros conversatorios de este mismo estilo con algunas otras personas que también quieren traernos sus experiencias de aciertos, de retos, de dificultades, de barreras que en otras partes del mundo se han superado, unos nuevos modelos que se han incorporado en otros países y que también pueden ser una gran lección para Colombia. Entonces, por favor, diligencien la lista de asistencia y estén pendientes a las convocatorias que seguiremos haciendo para el desarrollo y la apropiación de este tipo de modelos en Colombia. Nuevamente agradecerle a nuestro financiador, a UK Pact, por creer en esta iniciativa, por creer en Colombia y por apostar sus recursos hacia una transición energética más sostenible. Fundación EAS para la Paz, Miliquina y Conectipí, los socios implementadores, muchas gracias a todos y esperamos verlos en una próxima oportunidad.